Afrikaners have claimed asylum in the US. The white South Africans landed in Washington, D.C. on 12 May 2025. The trip was paid for by the US government. The refugees were warmly greeted by top officials.
But I want you all to know that you are really welcome here and that we respect what you have had to deal with these last few years. We respect the long tradition of your people.
Afrikaner immigrants will receive aid, a path to citizenship, and can expect to land entry-level jobs. They will reportedly be settled in states such as Alabama and Idaho. In February, Donald Trump invited Afrikaners to the US, claiming their community is persecuted in South Africa.
Farmers are being killed. They happen to be white, but whether they're white or black makes no difference to me, but white farmers are being brutally killed and their land is being confiscated in South Africa.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa rejects that claim.
Those people who are being enticed to go to the United States do not fit the definition of a refugee. A refugee is someone who has to leave the country out of fear of political persecution, religious persecution, or economic persecution.
The fact is, white people in South Africa enjoy privilege. They make up 7% of the population but own 70% of commercial land. White households earn 18 times more, with greater access to quality education and healthcare.
All right. Welcome to This Week in Africa, your weekly live stream where we dive into the stories affecting Pan-Africanism and Africa as a whole. I am one of your hosts, Joe Hatagwa, and I'll turn it over to my co-host, Gloria, for her introduction before I finish mine.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gloria Ayo, and I am the creator of The African Story. Basically, what I do is I share African history and I make it as entertaining as possible. But yeah, happy to be here again, Joe.
Yes, happy to have you. And I'm Joe Hatagwa, founder and CEO of Authentic African and AuthenticAfrican.com, platform helping Africans and Africans in the diaspora understand each other better and hope to get Africans in the diaspora to either visit, invest, or move to the continent of Africa. And then lastly, I do have a website where I sell ethically sourced products, ethically sourced handmade products from the continent of Africa to diasporans. So if you're interested in any of that, you can follow the platforms for all of that. Now, today on This Week in Africa, we are going to cover a number of different stories. And it's been a big week in the news. As you saw from that first video, we have some things to talk about, some hypocrisy to discuss. And I'll just start with the first story, right? So, you know, as you guys saw in that video, white South African quote unquote refugees have been granted refugee status in the United States, will be settling in a couple of states with entry-level jobs, a number of different things that aren't afforded to other refugees. Now, they've been allegedly persecuted. They arrived on the 12th of May, 2025, landed at Washington Dulles Airport. They've been invited by Trump, and their travel expenses were taken care of by the U.S. government and taxpayer dollars, by the way, U.S. taxpayer dollars. So they'll be settled in various U.S. states, receive aid, and can expect entry-level jobs, as I mentioned before, and are now on path to U.S. citizenship. So they're actually on path to U.S. citizenship. So Trump made the asylum offer in reaction to South Africa's new land expropriation law that allows seizures of very limited circumstances as part of efforts to address historical colonial injustices. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa rejected the idea that the white South Africans are actually being persecuted. They reportedly make up 7% of the country's population, but own over 70% of all commercial land. Another example of their privileged status in South Africa is the fact that on average, they earn 18 times as much as their Black and indigenous counterparts in the country. Now, I'd love to get your initial reactions. We just went over a video. Love to get your initial reactions, Gloria, before we get into some more videos about Trump's viewpoint on this and why, in fact, they decided to do this.
Yeah, it's just so interesting that Trump actually created a special asylum pathway just for the purpose of bringing this marginalized group of people to the United States. And on the other hand, there's suspension, continued suspension of the US refugee resettlement program. So actual refugees from war-torn countries are being restricted. And the irony is that he's saying, you know, be they black, be they white, dude, how convenient. They just happen to be white, right? These are like some of the few white Africans we have on the continent. And you flew right past Congo, where there's we've talked about Sudan on this show. There are people who could use some relief, but no, the Afrikaners in South Africa are such a group of, they're just victims of racial targeting. For Trump to say these things over and over, it's a very dangerous thing. The position that Trump occupies is a very sensitive position. But for him to keep repeating this, because when a US president makes dangerous accusations like this, you're just dividing the world further. That's why we have the Shiloh Hendrickses of this world, the woman who was racist towards the 5-year-old Somali American boy. That's why we have them so brazen. This is a group, I'm talking about the Afrikaners now, they're a group that is known to have historic ties to an apartheid regime, but they were the ones who needed to be saved. We've told Trump, we've told him many times, what is going on in South Africa is a national crisis. It's general crime. It's not targeting nobody specifically. I'm saying this in case somebody else out there is listening and actually believes Trump, because Elon told him something and he ran with it. There are asylum seekers who are dealing with Trump's refugee ceiling, which is at a historic low. These people aren't being protected. They're dealing with crazy vetting conditions, but you suddenly roll out the red carpet for that. I mean, y'all were literally there to receive them and empathize with them. And wow, oh, poor Afrikaners. It's just America has been set back. The world has been set back by so many decades. It's very sad.
Yeah. Agreed 100%. You know, and when I look at this, right, I think back to Trump's first administration, right? And, you know, reportedly, there were some questions about why do we let so many of these other people in? Why don't we let more people in from like the Netherlands and other places, right? And as much as he says in this statement, it doesn't matter who it is, you see who he brought over. And that will be witnessed by this video. If you want to see in the large numbers who has come as part of this refugee program, let's watch this video and we'll have some more commentary on the other side.
Yeah.
Has officially granted more than 50 white South Africans refugee status in the U.S. Kate Bartlett reports from Johannesburg. The Afrikaners are expected to land in the U.S. next week.
The group of white South Africans could arrive at Dulles Airport as early as Monday, 3 sources with knowledge of the matter told NPR, which has also seen an email confirming the arrangements. The sources all work for the U.S. government, so did not want to be named out of fear of retribution. This comes just 3 months after President Trump signed an executive order claiming Afrikaners face persecution in South Africa and could apply for refugee status in the United States. Afrikaners are the descendants of mainly Dutch colonists. The South African government says there is no evidence they are being persecuted and has accused the U.S. administration of being taken by disinformation. For NPR News, I'm Kate Bartlett.
So I just wanted you guys to see that because you can see the sheer number of folks. Now, you know, look, 50 people were granted it. As you guys know, other people who were seeking asylum for, you know, what I think most of us would agree are legitimate reasons were denied asylum, right? Many of which have been shipped off to elsewhere. You know, there have been comments to Ilhan Omar about going back to your country by, you know, folks who work in, you know, who are our colleagues. She was a refugee from Somalia, right? So you see how others of color, are treated who attempt to come to the United States on refugee status. But in this case, you know, sorry, my phone is going crazy. And in this case, you know, you have a situation where people who look like the president and his administration are the ones granted that refugee status. For example, Palestinians probably should be getting refugee status, right? If you really want to think about what's been happening to people in a certain country where there's very little land left for them to be in, you know, the United States has said you guys should be going to, you know, Egypt and or Jordan instead of inviting them to the United States, or whatever's happening in the DRC, or what's happening in South Sudan or in Sudan. You know, there are many places where there are large groups of people that are experiencing loss of life who could use refugee status and asylum, but they're not being granted it. And as you mentioned, it's at a, you know, they're reducing the number of people they offer this to. But then he signed an executive order now making a special case for those folks coming from South Africa. And so, you know, obviously this has a lot to do with Elon, you know, the Doge in chief, Elon, and you know, being a South African, and you know, others too, because Elon is not the only person who is of European descent that comes from Africa, right? Peter Thiel also has, you know, has also lived on the continent of Africa as well. He's the founder of Palantir, one of the other co-founders of PayPal with Elon Musk. And so, you know, those guys I would think are in Trump's ear. And that's what led to this executive order and what led to this special circumstance for these folks. And the first group came, but more people can apply for refugee status, right? So it doesn't stop with that group. So I'll be interested to see how this goes off in the United States. We'll see if anyone cares or if there's any pushback on this. But, you know, for all those people who say they hate immigrants, I'm interested to see how they react to these folks coming from South Africa. Yeah. So with that, I'll play one more video on this, because to your earlier point, you had mentioned that yeah, it's obviously misinformation, right? So you know, President Trump actually claimed a week ago, or yeah, about a week ago, that South Africa is committing a genocide against white Afrikaners. And that's why he granted the refugee status to the 59 South Africans, the Afrikaners. So he also threatened to boycott the next G20 summit unless the quote unquote situation is taken care of. So let's go to this video, and we'll have additional commentary on the other side.
It's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about, but it's a terrible thing that's taking place. And farmers are being killed. They happen to be white, but whether they're white or black makes no difference to me. But white farmers are being brutally killed, and their land is being confiscated in South Africa. And the newspapers and the media doesn't even talk about it. If it were the other way around, they'd talk about it. That would be the only story they'd talk about. I have people that live in South Africa. They say it's a terrible situation taking place. So we've essentially extended citizenship to those people to escape from that violence and come here.
Your thoughts?
Whether black, it makes no difference to me. There are Tigrayans in Ethiopia. There are Darfuris in Sudan. There are Congolese people in Eastern DRC that are facing threats that have been recognized and documented by the United Nations, by international courts. These are people whose suffering is not even up for debate. Real proven genocides. The one you're speaking of, President Trump, hasn't been verified by any of these places I mentioned, but you believe it because, again, Elon told you so. There is no denying that there are happening in South Africa, but they happen across all racial lines. So when a group of white South Africans whose current land tensions are largely about justice, not racial persecution, it's all about justice for the indigents of South Africa, for Black South Africans. You're not opening your doors to millions of people in real danger, not even just in Africa, throughout the world. There are people living in refugee camps. There are people who have been bombed, who have been raped, who have been starved in real time. These aren't speculative. We see it all over the news. You're saying they don't want to talk about this in the news. It's because it's not real. But yeah, anyway.
Sorry, guys, technical difficulties. We'll be getting back to her sound shortly. Sorry about that. Stay tuned. I need to connect to a new network.
Can you all hear me? If you can hear me, Joe, can you hear me? Okay. Can you all hear me? If somebody can hear me, can you please drop a comment so that way we can keep talking? Okay. So we're just going to wait for Joe. There's a bit of network issues. Thank you. Thank you for confirming that. We're just going to wait for Joe. Let me just go through the comments while we wait. Let's see what we have here. So Menelik wrote, "What's up, bro? I'm here." You're not gonna give me a shout out? No, I'm kidding. Hi, Awele from the UK. Hope I pronounced your name right. Afua, thank you so much for joining us. Greetings to you too. Yeah, I see your observation about the number of people here. Please spread the word. Let the people know that we're live every Thursday at 10 p.m. GMT, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We appreciate you. Hi, Asonkong. Greetings to you too. You wrote Mafa. I don't know what that means. Joe, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay. Forkan
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. We're back. Can you hear me?
Yes, we're back. I was just going through comments while we're waiting on you.
Okay, yeah, sorry. And my connection is very slow, so there's going to be a little bit of a delay. I'm sorry about that, guys. Shout out to West African internet service providers. You know, here we are. So, okay, you guys, okay, so everybody's just confirming they could hear.
Yes.
Okay, you went through some of these questions already? The Afrikaners aren't indigenous South African. Okay. Okay. In fact, President Trump also isn't originally indigenous to America. Simply put, he's a liar. Well, there you go. That is the thoughts of Farquan Ali. I like that. I like that, Farquan. I like that you have an opinion. Okay, so but yes, you're right. He is not indigenous to the United States of America. Unfortunately, they believe that although they're not indigenous, that they are Americans, and they're the only kind of Americans that should be here, right? As you can see by the Great Replacement theory, that the terms that they use to describe how it should look in America culturally. Okay, so and I apologize, guys, for my internet connectivity. You know, bear with me. This is just what it's like when I'm here. As many of you guys have followed throughout time, you guys have known this is how it goes. Okay, so I think we pretty much covered this particular topic, right? I mean, look, there's a lot to be said here, and I think my one final thought is this: you know, we are trying to talk about American politics on an African news weekly live stream, right? And we don't want this to become a, you know, partisan talking points, but I think we just have to point out the hypocrisy in this administration's immigration policy. You know, when they're deporting people who are American citizens, or who deporting people to countries they're not supposed to go to, they're doing deals with other countries to take people from other countries, and then at the same time, they are, you know, there's some hypocrisy in the fact that they are now, you know, or not they, he, has put in an executive order to accept a specific group of people, I mean, I don't think it takes much to understand who he is favoring in this situation. He said it doesn't matter what color they are, but then he said they're white, right? He specifically said it twice, in fact, to call it out. Now, the question is that a dog whistle for those who are here or who are in America, for them to hear that and to be outraged by what's the quote unquote genocide he's talking about? Is the reason why he's saying that they're white so that it can be clear that, look, I'm not just letting in any kind of refugees. I'm letting people who look like us in, you know? So don't worry, guys. It's not those guys. It's not the other South Africans. It's the white ones. So there may be that might be the method behind him saying that. But I think we just want to point out the hypocrisy and express that, you know, I don't agree with the current administration's immigration policy in general. And I take even more issue with this particular executive order. So anyway, that was my two thoughts there. Any other thoughts before we move on to the next story, Gloria?
Oh no, just that I guess again, it's, you know, when Trump got sworn in, because to your point about us not being partisan, I mean, I have criticized Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, I think the very first episode or the second one. So it's not, you just have to do right by the people. If you're not doing right by the people, I don't care what party you represent, I'm going to speak on it, you know? And when he got sworn in, that was what America wanted. We all had to respect it. And then all these things unraveling, it's like, it's quite exhausting always talking about this person, but we cannot not talk about him because these are things that are literally affecting lives. Claiming that Black South Africans are committing a genocide against white South Africans is a very dangerous thing to say. The president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, has told him these things are not true over and over again, yet you disrespectfully keep putting that information out there. That's very dangerous. And I don't think anybody should gloss over that. Have we lost Joe again? Can you hear us? Can you hear me? Okay. Can't hear Joe right now. Okay. So I'm just going to go back to reading comments until we hear back from Joe. Joe, can you hear me?
I'm back, but my network is still just very bad.
Okay. It's all good. Good. Willie, I'm glad I pronounced your name perfectly. Yay.
Sorry about the internet, guys. Okay, so, and I caught everything you said right up until I lost connection. So yeah, agreed 100%. So, you know, we'll move on to the next story. And so this story I think is an interesting one. There's been some people on either side having some challenges and or full support. So let's get into it. So Burkina Faso's been making some power moves. So this year's Victory Day celebrations in Moscow looked less like a standard show of military might and more like a summit of the unbowed, bringing together leaders from Africa, Asia, and the Americas.
Okay. So as we all know, Traoré is currently in Russia. Oh, no, Traoré has visited Russia, and they were having their Victory Day celebrations, marking the 80th anniversary of the defeat of Nazi Germany. During his visit, Traoré met with President Vladimir Putin, and he talked about the terrorism facing Burkina Faso to imperialism and sought Russian support to help combat these extremist groups. He also expressed interest in Russian assistance for developing Burkina Faso's scientific and industrial sectors. I am very curious about your thoughts on this because we've had, for instance, when we post content, right, or clips from each week, I see a few people in the comment section going, be careful, Russia is not so nice either. But I'm really curious, what are your thoughts on on this alliance with Russia. What are your thoughts on the AES partnering with Russia? Even beyond that, African countries partnering with China, for instance, Turkey often. So I'm just curious, like, what do you guys think? Do you think it's a good idea? Is it a case of the enemy of your enemy is also your friend? I'll be coming to comments in just a bit, but let me just scroll back up and read a couple of more comments. Keisha, you wrote, he's a clown. Put the clown emoji. I'm guessing you're talking about Trump. Oops. You wouldn't be the first person to say that. Hi, Joe.
I don't even know how much of that you guys got, but we're going to just jump into this video and then we'll have some commentary on the other side. Oh, guess what? The videos got lost, so now I have to re-upload them. Oh. Fun times. Okay. Maybe you want to read that next comment and then yes. And then we can. So
I already I read the story of Traoré in Russia.
Sorry, you said what?
Oh, I'm sorry. I already introduced what this was, what you were about to play, but you can go ahead.
Okay, great. Let's do it.
Heureux de pouvoir rencontrer le capitaine Traoré et ensemble pouvoir rejeter les bases d'une relation renforcée entre nos deux pays. Nous sommes les frères et les sœurs d'une même mère qui est la mère Afrique. Et nous admirons la lutte que le Burkina Faso a toujours menée pour la liberté, l'indépendance et la justice. Nous avons bâti de très bonnes choses entre le Burkina Faso et le Venezuela, entre l'Afrique et l'Amérique du Sud. Aujourd'hui, nous avons entamé un nouveau chemin. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. It's like I know one French phrase.
Yeah, I think we all do.
Merci beaucoup. So, you know, now Maduro is someone who definitely himself has been a controversial figure. And, you know, before I get your thoughts, I do want to mention this. You know, there are folks who are left aligned who, you know, in many cases, they always mean well for the country and they do well for the country, but there can be a lot of controversy surrounding some of these folks. So just keep in mind that there are going to be people who are going to be good faith actors who question some of these leaders who take over in coups and who remain in power. Now, there are also people on the other side who are not good faith actors who, of course, also take the opposite viewpoint. But I do think it's important to have nuance when we're talking about allyship and friendship and working together with countries that have controversial figures. So with that, I'd love to get your thoughts on this meeting between Ibrahim Traoré and Nicolas Maduro at this Victory Day parade in Russia.
Yeah, so I asked our wonderful audience to drop their thoughts on these alliances with Russia, now looking at Venezuela. But I was very curious to hear their thoughts because, like I told them, sometimes when we post clips from our show, I see people going, Russia is not your friend. So I even like the opportunity for us to clear that part a bit. I do understand why the AES needs alliances away from the West. You know, you've once made reference to the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and how that may not necessarily always be true. Because I think, okay, if I have a tiger and a lion and I'm in the middle, they're both enemies. Neither of them is my friend. You know, maybe that's an extreme comparison. But Russia seems to be less brutal than the West, to be fair. Okay. But I have to be very real. I am not super excited about an alliance with these countries. On the surface, it looks strategic, but it is very risky. Russia seems convenient because they're not lecturing African leaders about democracy, at least not publicly. They're not worried about LGBTQ rights, for instance. There are no IMF reforms in the picture. But I don't think Russia is exactly altruistic. I mean, this man is friends with Kim Jong-un. And true, yeah, Russia did not colonize Africa in the 19th century, but that doesn't mean they're not here in the 21st century to extract what they can. They are playing a long game. And then meeting with Nicolas Maduro in the same week, a man whose own, you talked about him being controversial, his own people have protested en masse. His government has been accused of brutality, a horrible economy. He's reportedly responsible for the exile of over 7 million citizens. And Russia backs this man. So these are the areas that I'm like, okay, I get it. We need partnership, but we do have to tread softly, for real.
Yeah, that's well put. And I think it's important to look at, like I said, this is with nuance, right? I mean, because everything that we've seen so far from what Ibrahim Traoré has been doing has been what he said he was going to do and is aligned with a Pan-African viewpoint and a vision for the future, right? And he sounds a lot like Thomas Sankara when he speaks. And so, you know, I think we can all agree that the direction the country is going is one that we'd like to see. But again, some of these allyships and partnerships we'll have to watch closely, and hopefully, you know, he's treading lightly, as you said. So with that being said, I do want to kind of talk about some of the other discussions that are happening. As you asked, and rightfully so, you know, how do people feel about the alliances with Russia? And so, you know, he's met with Vladimir Putin in Moscow during the Victory Day celebrations, signaling a deepening alliance between the two nations. He praised Russia's global role and called for expanded cooperation beyond military aid, including education and development. While rejecting direct military assistance, he emphasized knowledge sharing and strategic support to combat jihadist insurgencies back home. The visit marks Burkina Faso's continued pivot away from the Western allies, like France, aligning more closely with Moscow. As ties grow, Russia is also eyeing mining and energy opportunities in the region. Now, we'll watch this video and we'll ask that question: what does this mean for Sahel? Oh, you know what? I have to upload the video again. Sorry, guys. Give me a second. It'll be up in 3, 2, 1 now.
10.
Shifting focus to Burkina Faso now, the junta leader Ibrahim Traoré has called for deeper ties with Russia. Ibrahim Traoré, the head of Burkina Faso's military-dominated government, was in Moscow over the weekend. He met Russian President Vladimir Putin after attending the Victory Day military parade held on the 9th of May at Red Square. Traoré said that he wants his country's relations with Russia to grow exponentially and to expand into new areas of cooperation. He clarified that he would not ask for military aid from Moscow while the Russian forces are engaged in Ukraine, but he urged Russia to share its knowledge, help educate Burkina Faso's young population, and to support efforts to end the jihadist conflict in the country. Traoré also praised Moscow's role on the global stage.
I think that with all the sanctions against Russia for some time, Russia has even developed an internal mechanism that puts it at the forefront of the international scene. And we are taking good notes of these lessons we have learned here.
Putin, for his part, highlighted the growing volume of trade between Russia and Burkina Faso. He noted Russia's ongoing humanitarian support, despite being under international sanctions. Putin said that Russia would continue to assist Burkina Faso by suppressing radical groups and training state officials.
Today, we are united by a common goal, the fight against terrorism and extremism. We will continue to assist the Republic in restoring legality and constitutional order, while contributing to the repression of radical groups that remain in certain regions of Burkina Faso.
Under Traoré, who seized power in a coup in September of 2022, Burkina Faso has moved away from its former colonial master, France, and has moved closer to Russia. Russia has reportedly sent military advisors and equipment, some linked to the Wagner Group, now rebranded as Africa Corps. Now, the Burkinabe military leadership views Russian assistance as crucial in combating jihadist insurgencies in the Sahel. Russia has also expanded its presence in Burkina Faso's mining sector, particularly in gold and uranium. Agreements have been signed for Russian companies to explore and extract mineral resources. There are also plans for infrastructure projects and potential cooperation in nuclear energy. Burkina Faso's turn toward Russia is part of a broader trend among military-led governments in the Sahel, including Mali and Niger. All three nations have withdrawn from the regional bloc ECOWAS and have formed the Alliance of Sahel States.
I will leave it there for now. So, I mean, this spoke to a number of different key areas of partnership between the two countries, right? And then again, this is very similar. Okay, for now, I still have my internet connection, but this also signals more of what's happening with the AES as well. It's not just Burkina Faso, but yeah. So Gloria, your thoughts on the different elements of this relationship that were just discussed.
Yes, and like I said, you know, I understand we should be free from the West, but I don't think we need new dependencies. We can reject the West without romanticizing Russia. We need to be more sufficient, more self-sufficient as a continent. We need more Africa-centered power instead of falling into the hands of the West, the hands of Russia, China, or any other power that's hungry for our minerals. We need to build regional unity. We need to invest in homegrown security forces. We don't have to rely on Russia's armies. Foreign soldiers are not going to die for Africans, but African soldiers will die for Africans. We need to have our own forces trained by us because they understand African crises. You know what I mean? We know what the crises are. We're the best people to fight to defend our own people. We also need to build local economies. And in doing so, we have to ensure that those resources that are being negotiated are done openly, because African soil belongs to all the people, right? So all these covert, secret deals, we need everything out in the open. We have condemned the bias of foreign media on this platform. And I think you'll play the video soon where he condemns that as well. So I'm not trying to get fixated on that. But one thing we can do, oh yeah, you remember a clip that we posted recently actually went viral on this conversation about how during the protests, foreign media wasn't covering it. And then, when it's bad news, they're there. So another thing that Traoré could focus on, and other African leaders, is we need to start funding African platforms that can help shape the African narrative globally. Because information war is real, especially in this digital age. Africa cannot afford to keep being a spectator. We need to have skin in the game. Otherwise, we're going to get misrepresented. We're going to get erased. And if we must go outside the continent, how about partners that have had the same struggles as we have? The Caribbean would be a great one, for instance, I think.
I agree. And, one of the things that I heard in this video in particular, where Ibrahim Traoré was applauding Russia for, is the same thing he applauds Mali for. And I'll give him this, is the idea that Mali has been able to become one of the fastest growing economies in the world despite being sanctioned, right? And so that was what he was saying about Russia. Russia has had many sanctions put on them and has still been able to figure out how to make things happen. But I think those sanctions has led to Russia actually really ramping up their relationships on the continent of Africa, because many of these African countries are not going to abide by those sanctions, right? And also many of those African countries could use Russian aid and Russian business, right? And business ties, especially as they're stepping away from the West. So, I think although Russia has found a way to continue to grow and build on, what, Vladimir Putin's, his promise to his people were, I do think that is because the United States has actually sanctioned them, and it's allowing them to do business with the mineral-rich countries that they hadn't been doing as much with until recently, right? So, you know, I'm maybe not so impressed by what Russia has been able to do after the sanctions. And I'm just really hoping that, as we talked about before, and as people have said in the comments, that Traoré is, you know, operating with his eye open. And as they trade and do those deals, they continue to expand outside of the AES, and other countries on the continent of Africa want to work with them. I think our biggest challenge on the continent is that we have the raw natural resources, but they get refined elsewhere and get brought back in to the continent of Africa. And so I do think if Africans can work on getting the refining of those natural resources happening on the continent. You know, we have oil refineries in Nigeria now. There's looking like there's going to be an oil refinery open in Ghana. They're, you know, obviously mining gold in Burkina Faso, and hopefully we can start to refine it on the continent as well. So as long as they can learn that from maybe, let's say, Russia and China and apply that back home without having to do long-term deals for over 50, 60 years and put themselves in debt, then I say, okay, you got favorable circumstances. Sorry, my network went out for a second. Am I back?
We can hear you.
Okay, so as long as it's favorable deal terms, then that's what I want to see. So again, they should be careful, but also at the same time, you're going to need to do these deals at some point with somebody. And if it's not going to be the West, then it's going to be the Far East. I just think we have to do it with one eye open. You know, excuse me, I made this comment to you, Gloria, when we were watching the videos earlier. You know, Ibrahim Traoré is, you know, he's always very like stone cold faced, right? When he's meeting with people, and he always does these fist bumps, right? When he meets with people. But for whatever reason, when he meets with Vladimir Putin, he is smiling from ear to ear, and he shakes his hand with two hands, right? And, you know, look, obviously it's a partnership that he wants to expand. And, you know, we've already talked about all the things that we hope to see from this. I just hope that, you know, everything that we're saying he's doing, and he's not enamored by Russia because of how Russia is treating him. Because I think what we are starting to realize is how much the rest of the world needs Africa. And it seems like Russia and China are the only ones who are acting like they understand that, right? So they're welcoming African heads of state instead of meeting with, you know, the ambassador to that country. They're actually meeting with the head of state. Whereas many times in the United States, when an African leader comes to the United States, they meet with the ambassador to that country. They don't always meet with the president of the United States, right? And so I do think that it's evident that the East and the West need Africa, and it just seems like the East has done a better job of showing that they need Africa. But I think Africans need to take a better stance of knowing that we have more negotiating power, and we should act as if we have more negotiating power. So that's what I'll say to that. You know, but I'm in support of, obviously, of what Traoré is doing. I just also have to call out that, you know, I noticed that smile is so big. You know, like I have rarely seen him.
Yeah, he does smile. And the handshake with the two hands, that's
unless he's dealing with the other AES leaders. So that was just the thing that I think that came to mind with me. Like that smile. Yes. And the two handshake. Yes. So with that, he did do an interview. And sorry, my network is breaking up, so I apologize if you guys are you still hearing me, Gloria?
Yeah, I'm jumping in right when it breaks. So sometimes you might hear my voice.
Okay. So I'll get into this. I'll read a little bit, and then we'll get into the story. So lastly, okay. So Burkina Faso President Ibrahim. Okay, I can hear you. Sorry, there's a little bit of a delay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Network. Oh, sorry, my network is so bad. I apologize, guys. Bear with us. We're still trying to get you the news stories, even with this poor connection. Okay, so obviously Ibrahim Traoré was in in Russia and Moscow over this last week. And, you know, one of his quotes was saying, stop using Black people against Black people. So we finally got a response and commentary directly from Ibrahim Traoré about Michael Langley. And so here's what he said. You know, stop betraying Black people. So he said he gave such comments. So he gave such comments during an interview with news outlet Sputnik Afrique on the 12th of May in Moscow in response to Langley's comments on the 3rd of April to the U.S. Senate Committee on Armed Services, where he said Traoré was reclaimed gold reserves to protect a junta regime. Obviously, Langley's claims enraged Africans worldwide, prompting video messages on social media platforms. Solidarity protests broke out on the 30th of April in Burkina Faso and worldwide, including in cities such as London, Paris, and Accra, Ghana. There was one that was shut down in Nigeria, as we talked about last week. However, as Traoré pointed out in this clip, Langley is not the first Black person to work in service of imperialism. And, you know, some people call out what happened under the Obama administration with Libya, with the 2011 US-led NATO invasion. Excuse me. So let's get to this video and give some commentary on the other side.
Fait mal, pas parce qu'il est général ou parce que c'est un Américain ou quoi, c'est parce que c'est un noir. Et ça fait très mal de voir qu'on utilise un noir pour combattre un noir. Et ça n'a pas commencé maintenant. Il faut que ça s'arrête. Voilà, c'est très dangereux. Même la Libye, qui a détruit la Libye, on a encore utilisé un noir. Et je souhaite peut-être qu'il fasse un mea culpa. Il a parlé de l'or de Burkina, qui sert à ce que nous on utilise pour se protéger et tout. D'abord, c'est l'or du Burkina, c'est pas son or. Ça, c'est la première des choses. En quoi ça le regarde? Ça le regarde, il faut que ça s'arrête maintenant. La race noire ne doit pas être utilisée pour combattre les noirs. Ils peuvent le regretter, par plusieurs canaux, ils essaient de se rattraper. Mais non, ça a été dit publiquement, il faut se rattraper publiquement. Africain a compris, la jeunesse noire dans le monde entier a compris. Cette manipulation ne passe plus.
There it is. Any thoughts on that interview and what he said there?
He has a great point. And I have to give Traoré kudos. You see, when the protests were going on worldwide, we didn't hear from him. He was just somewhere quiet, and then he released a statement, and it's like, you're just what I'm saying. He wasn't even trying to milk the moment. So it says a lot about him. You know, it's not about chasing clout. He just really wants the best for Africa. And he does have a point. And I love the angle from which he approached this. He didn't knock the man down. It's like, I actually understand you were a pawn. You were used for this. And he spoke to the people responsible for that. Of course, Langley does have to take accountability for even agreeing to do that. And I mean, I know he knows how to defend himself, but that was a very dangerous thing, a dangerous position to put himself in. But yeah, I think Traoré spoke extremely intelligently, and he wasn't like trying to be critical, but everything he stated were facts, and I 100% agree with him.
Yeah, agreed. You know, look, what I like about what Traoré does, right? As you mentioned, he put out a statement. He makes sure that he understands, maybe differently from the American's president, he understands how important it is to be very clear in your statements. He does not mince words. He knows that his words are going to be a part of the historical record, right? And you can tell he speaks that way. He speaks in a way that you know that these words will live on for a long time. And so he's ensuring that he's not engaging in propaganda. He's not saying anything that is going to enrage any group of people. He's just speaking facts and speaking in a way that is clear and concise. This guy does not, wax poetic, right? Like, he just says something and he moves on. Yes. I thought it was really important that he did say it the way he did, right? He said it was unfortunate. It hurt me to see that this was a Black man, right? The way he spoke about him, because he could have responded in kind and he didn't. And so I really appreciate that, especially for a young leader and someone who has military training and background. He obviously is someone who is very level-headed and you know, he thinks through everything he says. So yeah, I give him a lot of credit for how he responded, or how he responded to the protests around the world. I give him a lot of credit for how he responded to Langley's comments. And so yeah, I mean, look, as I said in the earlier statement, you know, I'm supportive of the direction that his country is going in. And so it's important to see someone like this galvanizing so many people around the world. And I'm just hoping that we continue to see this, and that, you know, we don't end up with, you know, new colonial powers on the continent of Africa. That's the thing that I just want us to be clear of, and hope that we don't get there. There's a couple of comments. Michael Langley, false statement about Traoré's name just made millions of Black people around the world just love him even more. That is true. Real Source has a good point. I'm hoping that Traoré's change in demeanor with Putin is strategic. He knows how Putin's ego needs to be stroked. You know, look, many world leaders do need that. I do get that. And, you know, American president not excluded from that. But yes, many world leaders need that. And so, yes, it may be that. I hope it's that, just like you said, the Real Source, I hope it's that as well. We'll leave it there. Okay, so any other final thoughts, Gloria, before we move on to the next stories? I need to find videos to upload.
Oh, okay. Well, I could maybe play around in the comment section. Let me know when you're ready to play the video.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Kwame wrote, wow, okay, all right. Maria wrote, I don't know why anybody is surprised about Plantation USA. They've never liked Black people ever with their crumbs. Okay. Oh, wow, interesting. Okay, thank you for sharing. Afua wrote, most of the Caribbean people are Eurocentric in their mindset and attitude, and the USA is in full control of every island in the West Indies, in my opinion.
That's what Afia wrote. Okay. Farquan says Ibrahim Traoré and the AES should build their own African Union headquarters in Burkina Faso or base somewhere in Ghana. They have a joint security force with Russia at the AU. Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm just weary of people outside of Africa being in Africa. I mean, I don't know. You know, look, Ibrahim Traoré obviously has done a great job of fighting insurgencies. But you do have to buy your weapons from somewhere if you're not manufacturing them. So there does have to be joint military action. You do have to get weaponry. And most of the weaponry that I have seen and heard about is, you know, bought secondhand and is a little bit older, right? It's the same thing. If you ever seen the movie War Dogs, right? These guys were selling, you know, machine guns from, you know, the USSR to Afghanistan. So, you know, obviously you don't want to have really old weaponry and machinery. Russia seems to be, you know, creating all kinds of high level intercontinental ballistic missiles and all the things, you know, and so maybe it makes sense to work with them and buy some of what they have to be able to stomp out some of the terrorism that's happening in the region. And, you know, it overlaps in different countries, right? It's not just Burkina Faso, it's Mali, it's Niger, it's northern Nigeria, right? There are these folks in these insurgent groups that need to be stopped, right? And so, you know, I understand the need for assistance from the Far East. Okay.
Quickly read this comment. Awele.
Okay, go ahead. Which one? Which comment? Let me see.
Awele wrote, wasn't Russia just waging an unfair war against Ukraine? What do they know about training the youth of Burkina Faso? And I do want to add, you know, I was trying not to touch on the accusations or the allegations around the Wagner group when they were in Africa. Of course, they've since rebranded, but there were a lot of cases or stories of human rights abuse. But the reason I didn't touch on that was, again, because now anything from Western media is, you know, now I have to look at things, you know, very critically. So sure. There were those rumors out there on the continent of abuse from the Wagner group. So, yeah. I think
and so on to,
who got killed, but anyway, go on, or who died.
Right. No, and I was just gonna say on to stories about the how the West looks at Africa.
Yes.
I want to, you know, we have a couple of stories here, specifically.
Okay.
Whitewashing. So British commentary, Carole Malone is under fire for trying to rewrite history.
Okay. So while we wait for Joe,
Violence, exploitation, and erasure of entire cultures in favor of what she called development and infrastructure. So let's play the video and we're going to have some commentary on the other line, on the other side.
Yes, it is true. They think everything about colonization was wrong. It wasn't. There were some terrible things and there were some good things to come out of it. And that is about properly acknowledging your past.
Education.
Yes, completely.
Sanitation.
Transportation.
There was so much that we brought to communities.
But you see, you're typical of what we're talking about.
No, I'm saying that colonization, the empire was wrong. It was wrong, full stop. That's, you know, the things that Britain might have done.
But that's very much through your modern sensibility.
Yes.
We wouldn't now routinely go into other countries.
It was a profoundly racist set of basically invasions of other people, where we subjugated people to our rule and sort of made them work for us. It was
made their countries work.
But imagine yourself in the shoes of a 13-year-old boy hearing you say that.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
What do they then? How do they then carry that through life?
Well,
in terms of who I am as a Brit.
But it's not about.
We had racist ancestors. Say it,
but Bev.
But I'm saying that we hear much more of that than we do about the benefits of that period of time.
Well, because I don't think there were benefits. I think that we have to be completely.
Of course there were.
I don't think there were.
There were benefits to us.
A lot of those countries did not, Jonathan, those countries...
It absolutely does.
Those countries did not have money. They did not have the creativity. They did not have people in positions of power to do this. No, they didn't.
Countries. They just didn't live like Britain did. It doesn't make it worse. It just makes it different.
So it's okay to live without education, and it's okay to live without a transportation system, is it?
They did have education. It just wasn't our education system. They had language. It wasn't our language.
This cultural
medicine we brought to
precisely what we have.
Yes.
I don't know. Look, I don't know why we're even.
Whew. You know, I will say, this guy tried. He was not necessarily the right representative to have this discussion. But yes, please, Gloria, I love your thoughts. I have some, but I'd love your thoughts first, please.
Any African who doesn't get triggered by this video, well, maybe except Kemi Badenoch. Oops. Oh, she's not African. I am glad that they spoke up. You know, I prefer that you let us know. You know, these are things that have been in your heart all along, but y'all were only whispering behind closed doors. But because of the times we're in, where there's a person in power somewhere in the world that somehow makes you all so bold, you know, you come out with these kinds of comments. But you see that image of one voice against three. That is what racism looks like. Kudos to that man. He did the best he could. You could tell, I think his mouth, you can tell his mouth got dry, but ironically, he seems to be the only educated and civilized one among all of them, considering they were claiming that they gave Africa civilization. And there are other people like him. And this is why I don't like to generalize, because I wouldn't want my race generalized. I'm not trying to replace racism with reverse racism, but I do get why people feel that going extreme is the answer. But there are people like this man who think like this. The problem is that many of them are silent. And this is why I give him props, because when good people say nothing, the bad narratives, they keep winning. Now, to those people in the room, you see this revisionist narrative trying to idealize the colonial era. Long before your ancestors came, we had our own empires. We had our own universities. You came to destroy our civilization and you replaced it with yours. Your ancestors came to our continent to extract. Your ancestors redrew our maps to divide us. They turned ethnic groups against one another something that is still affecting Africa to this very day. So to hear someone like Carole say something like this is mind-blowing. I mean, we shouldn't be shocked, but even like, it's still shocking, even for a British person to say. But this is how you all choose to rewrite the story. You say these things to console yourselves and your children that your ancestors were not that evil after all. You see, Britain's colonial legacy is not something to ever be proud of. Never, ever be proud of it. I am shocked at where the world is right now. I've said that many times. Post-civil rights, the world felt like it had healed. We still had a long way to go, but there was a lot of progress. Apartheid fell in South Africa. Obama even became president at some point and got reelected. Now people are no longer whispering their racism. They're tweeting it openly. Very toxic. They're discussing on panels like this one loudly. Did you see how bold they were? How brave, how loud they got? Bigotry is now free speech. It's going to take a long time, Joe, to undo this damage, as far as I'm concerned, because at this point, it's like, what do we do? But we will keep doing our part, even though they prefer that we stay silent. And I see why somebody said you're a very reliable news platform. I'm sure you saw it in the comments, but you just chose to, because you're so modest.
I didn't read it, but I put it on screen. No, yeah, I'll say this. What's interesting when I look at somebody like her, right? It's funny because she talked about we brought education to Africa, right? And she obviously is not well educated, because if not for the Moors, Europeans would not have come out of the Dark Ages, right? The Europeans, we all had this European history, right? We had to learn European history. Wherever we are in the world, we all had to learn European history at one point. I remember them talking about the Dark Ages and the Renaissance. Well, the Dark Ages and the Renaissance didn't just happen out of nowhere. There were Africans and Arabs in Europe. And you know how you know this is true? The alphabet that we write today, the numbers that we do today are in Arabic writing. It is not Roman numerals. Do you know that we'd be writing in Roman numerals if not for the Moors going to Europe? So that same education that they're saying that they brought to Africa was taught to them by Africans and Arabs, right? The Moors brought education to Europe, took them out of the Dark Ages, took them into the Renaissance period. Then, of course, they took gunpowder from China and turned it into guns, and then turned it on Africans in Africa and brought everything that they brought to Africa and think that they improved the continent of Africa, when really we improved Europe. They just had weapons that we could not fight against. So anyway, when I see this, to me, it's clear that she is the uneducated one. She does not know her own history. And I can't blame her, because why would she know that? Why would anybody ever tell her that the Europeans didn't really have universities? It was the Africans and the Arabs that brought university system, cleaning, astrology, music, writing, right? All of this stuff was brought to them. So I don't know how my connection is, if you caught all of that. So sorry, my connection went out. But I think that was really important, that she just didn't know. And it's crazy that she's talking about how they improved the lives of Africans, when really Africans improved the lives of Europeans, and then Europeans came and turned around and colonized the same people who gave them the knowledge that they even have. I'm off my soapbox. That's it for now.
You were preaching.
But yeah, I did that. That was the first time I saw that video. I was like, okay, we have to talk about this. I really don't get worked up about a lot, but I think it's so important that, because she started saying you can't take today's, and this is a statement that actually is true. You can't always take today's belief systems and knowledge and apply it to yesteryear. But one thing that's never been okay is invading another place and forcing them into slavery and using your own and using religion to justify the things that you do. That's never been okay. And I don't care how you slice and dice it, it's just never been okay. And so the fact that she seems to think that because Britain benefited from colonizing Africa and the West Indies and parts of the Americas, and same thing with the Spanish, that meant that it's okay, or the quote unquote benefits to Africa, justify that colonialism, I think is crazy. And so yes, there, without there is no them. That is true. Keisha mentioned it, and also, yeah, I mean, Sangbe is saying it correctly, right? Revisionist narratives only serve the colonist mindset, and she for sure had the colonist mindset. Okay. With that, there was a couple more stories we wanted to get to. We are over time, guys, and so I know we started a little late. We're running a bit behind time, but we appreciate all of you joining and participating in the conversation. So next, I want to get to a story about Mali, and so so Malian President Assimi Goïta, who just received a blessing from his civil society and traditional and other leaders for a 5-year term as president. So the recommendation came down from a national gathering held on the 28th and 29th of April in the capital of Mali. Such a process occurred Burkina Faso and Niger recently, of course, which also granted 5-year terms to their revolutionary leaders who came into power in recent years following successful people-backed revolutions. While there has been some explosion of international support for Burkina Faso President Ibrahim Traoré, Enam Richardson urged viewers not to forget about neighboring ally Mali. Now, I think it's also important to know that there are people who are American content creators and commentators who took issue with Mali not having another election. And so in the live stream that happened last week, Tuesday, that I did with African Stream journalist Enam Richardson, we talked about this particular story. So we're going to revisit that and give our thoughts on this particular live stream. So we'll play the video and have some commentary.
Process on the 28th and 29th of April, so this past month, 2025, that basically brought in members of civil society organizations, traditional leaders, as well as elements of the Malian diaspora were also consulted to recommend and appoint Assimi Goïta for a 5-year term as the president of the Republic of Mali. This is how the process happened more or less in Burkina Faso and more or less in Niger as well. So all 3 countries now have had this process, and all 3 leaders have received 5-year terms that are eligible also to be re-elected afterwards. This is a very positive thing because this brings stability to the Alliance of Sahel States. Assimi Goïta is the current president of the AES Confederation. Those who do not want to see the Alliance of Sahel States succeed are freaking out and panicking, and fingers are being pointed, dictatorship, this and that, military rule, blah, blah, blah. But you have to understand that, for one, overwhelmingly, the people in the Sahel support the AES and want to see the 3 leaders remain in power. We don't hear as much about Mali, but African Stream has covered quite a bit about, for example, Mali's ongoing battle to have more control over its gold mines. The last update we gave was about Barrick Gold, which was, it's a foreign mining company that has had its Bamako office closed. Mali's battling 3 different foreign mining companies for control over its gold mines. Mali is at the forefront right now building West Africa's largest solar panel field. Mali is working on building a nuclear power plant, much like Burkina Faso, and Mali is working to build also gold refineries in-house. This is a country that is also being attacked and targeted by imperialists right now. The only Alliance of Sahel States country to have U.S. sanctions on it is Mali. So the United States government is currently sanctioning Malian officials tied to the government and the military. So let us give our full support to President Assimi Goïta. We're excited to see him be president. I just want people to be able to know and support Mali just like they support Burkina Faso and just like they should support Niger.
Well put. Of course, Inem always comes with the facts. So she is on the ground in Niger as we speak. She just opened the Thomas Sankara Center, which we covered last week, in Niger, and she goes back and forth between Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Her home base is in Burkina Faso, but yeah, so she obviously knows what's happening on the ground. And there was a groundswell of support for Assimi Goïta. And as she mentioned, he's the president of the AES, right? So the AES is trying to turn what were 3 separate countries into one federation in one country with 3 different states. And that's kind of the start to what we would like to see with as United States of Africa, right? So this is kind of the first phase of that, if we could ever get there for the continent. But yeah, so Assimi Goïta is the president of the AES. And so obviously for stability purposes, he has to be the president of Mali for 5 years, and then obviously is up for re-election for another 5-year term. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this before I give my additional thoughts.
Right. To be clear, any abuse, whether by a civilian government, whether by a junta, must be called out. It was never a beautiful thing having military people ruling your country. I was discussing this with you, Joe, how that was never even a thing that anybody wished for. Well, you see, these so-called civilian governments throughout Africa have ruined Africa so badly that the people are now preferring, or some people even fantasize about having the military take over.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't a fan of it, but I'm going to be honest. I'm still not particularly a fan of it, but it just feels like there's no other option. They've left the people with no other choice but to keep wishing for these military leaders. So naturally, being military comes with some level of dictatorship, right? I guess the good thing now is at least the coups are less bloody than back in the day, but there's still going to be some level of dictatorship, which would, some would see as human rights abuse. That's their style. I'm not endorsing it. So again, I'm not a fan of military style dictatorship or military rule, but the people are beginning to prefer this because the governments have failed the people. So here we are, and that's why you would hear people lobbying for these people to come in and supporting them and saying, let's throw our weight behind the AES because at least they're doing far better than, the puppets who were in power before them.
Yeah, there it is. And I mean, look, generally a coup is characterized, and this is something that was taught to me recently, characterized by a few military leaders taking over. Generally, a revolution is characterized by a groundswell of support for those same military leaders to take over. And so I think what we're seeing in the AES is a revolution, not just a coup, right? As you just mentioned, military leadership has not been something that people have wanted historically. They've always wanted, at least in the last couple of 100 years, right? The idea of democracy has become more and more commercialized, and I would say ubiquitous around the world. And people expect to vote for a leader. However, after many times of voting for leaders who haven't had the best countries at heart, they were, as you said, they were beginning to hope for someone else to come in and take over, someone who they could believe in, someone who had their best interests at heart. And in this case, it happened in 3 countries that all happen to be connected with each other, right? And so it happened in Burkina Faso, it happened in Mali, it happened in Niger. And they also can all work together, which is also new, to be able to have a common cause. If you saw what Inem was talking about, for the first time ever, Mali is talking about refining its own gold. We were just talking about the fact that we have the unrefined natural resources, the raw materials. It goes elsewhere to get refined and then comes back to the continent at exponentially higher prices. If they who own the supply chain win. And so if it originates in Mali, refined in Mali, then sold elsewhere, Mali benefits. And that goes back to the people. So yes, is a military dictatorship not the ideal scenario generally? Yeah, I think I agree with you on that too. But was it needed in these particular instances? So it seems, because we're now getting the results the country has always wanted. They're clearing out their debt. They're refining their natural resources. They are putting people to work. They are changing the way we see the world. They're also encouraging and changing the way the continent sees Africa. You know, many people on the continent have not been so proud of our leaders on the continent. And now there are a few leaders to be proud of on the continent. And you're seeing that with these protests. You're seeing that with how people are responding to these particular leaders. And then the last thing I'll say is, you know, when it comes to these three countries, right, or this confederation, they realize that together they can have better collective bargaining than they can apart, right? And until the rest of Africa gets to a point where they start to think that way, the continent of Africa will always have these issues where you have people like that woman, Carole, whatever her name is, speaking about Africa the way she does. And you'll always have people around the world treating Africa the way they have been. You know, we have to take back our countries, and we have to take back our natural resources. And so I'm excited to see what's going on there. I do hope that after, you know, 10 years of rule, that they do end up having enough people that have come up through the ranks that all believe the same things and actually run political parties that operate the same way, and then they can actually go back to the democratic rule. But until then, you can't really disrupt the process, because they've changed the country in just this short amount of time. So those are my thoughts on that. And you know, the Real Source has a point here. There's a point. The Real Source. So those who have something to say happen to live in a place that some people might agree is a dictatorship. All right, we got one final story, and this one is in sort of my ancestral homeland, Gloria's ancestral homeland for sure. But this is actually not such a great story. But it's a great ending to the story. And so I'm going to okay, let me give some background before I just go right into the video, right? So I wanted to say that recently Air Peace, an airline based in Nigeria, I used to call Air War, watch the video to know what I'm talking about back on my page. But anyway, airlifts Nigerian girls trafficked to the Ivory Coast. You know, it's the largest Nigerian airline. It successfully airlifted 78 Nigerian women who were victims of human trafficking in Cote d'Ivoire or Ivory Coast, and it brought them back to Nigeria.
Okay. Brought them back to Nigeria. Hello, Joe. Okay, so the Nigerian federal government successfully brought back 78 victims of human trafficking that were stranded in Cote d'Ivoire. Most of them were vulnerable people, including underage girls. And as Joe mentioned, Air Peace was the airline that flew them back to Nigeria, and they did it free of charge. Kudos to them. There's a popular guy in Nigeria called Very Dark Man. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Very Dark Man, but Very Dark Man is known to fight, you know, is an activist, and he speaks out against issues. And a lot of people have credited him for bringing this story to light. And that was how the government was able to get involved. So the rescue was coordinated by the Nigerian embassy in Abidjan, the Nigerian community in Cote d'Ivoire, the International Organization for Migration, and again, Air Peace helped bring them back free of charge. So they all arrived in Lagos, Nigeria on Saturday night, and they're now being debriefed, and they're being profiled by relevant agencies. So trafficking occurred, and thankfully they were able to rescue these girls. Joe, can you hear us? Are you back?
So it seems. I'm gonna put the video up, and I saw you explaining the story. So I'm gonna play the video, and we'll have some more commentary on the other side.
Air Peace has begun to repatriate Nigerian girls trafficked to Ivory Coast following the outcry raised by activist Martins Oche, popularly known as Very Dark Man, who highlighted the plight of young Nigerian girls trafficked to the neighboring West African country. Chairman of Air Peace Airlines, Dr. Alan Onyema, had pledged to repatriate the girls free of charge. Araz News' Rufai Osane witnessed the story.
Symbolic day. I just came on the flight to Ivory Coast today. You remember the girls trafficked to Ivory Coast from what happened as regards, that situation where I think it was a Very Dark Man, Martins, that revealed when he came to Ivory Coast some of the girls trafficked. We are currently in the flight, in Abidjan, where Air Peace in its magnanimity has said they were going to evacuate those girls and bring them back. So we are right there in the flight. Very next video you're going to be seeing here are that of the girls.
The truth is that a lot of them have been lured by hyper-paid job, and there's nothing like hyper-paid job anywhere. Even in America, Europe, nothing like hyper-paid job. People will tell you, come, you work in a restaurant, they'll pay you $5,000. It doesn't exist anywhere. So what we are telling our young girls and young boys, they should be very, very mindful of who they go with. Most of these girls were actually kidnapped.
And thanks to VDM, who just made this thing possible. Well, thank God that this happened. I thank APIS for giving our children this opportunity to be repatriated back to Nigeria. Well, thousands of Nigerians girls trapped in the forest over there. So I think the federal government need to come into this picture and take their responsibility. Liaise firstly with the government of the state, the nation, and also with other agencies. Nigerian community under my watch are doing our possible best to make sure from 2021, May 29 till date, we have already repatriated over 1,500 Nigerian girls back to Nigeria. And all these things are going to we'll write report and send to all the agencies that are supposed to take care of this. But they have not done anything until VDM came to the picture and say that Nigerians will not be sequestrated in this manner anymore.
We hope that after the girls return home, the government will be able to empower them, because what we saw was indeed very gory. Some of them pregnant, some of them, in a bad shape, some of them sick. We just hope that after a psychologist goes through them, there's a lot of health check, healing process.
So VDM was that acronym, Very Dark Man, was mentioned. Before I think, do you want to give some context to who Very Dark Man is and the story behind this? Because that wasn't really explained in this particular video.
Okay. Yes, and that's a good point, because the stories are hardly out there. Matter of fact, the first time I ever heard about this story was directly from Rufai Osane. And kudos to him. I forgot to mention his name in the shout out. He was literally in Abidjan on ground. And I just remember him sounding very exhausted. He kept saying, man, I'm so tired. This took a lot of toll on him physically and mentally. That was a lot to witness. So Very Dark Man had been, he basically comes online. I've told you about Very Dark Man. He comes online and he speaks to societal issues. Some people would say he's the voice of the voiceless. He is controversial. So because of that, sometimes people, for instance, I talked about his arrest just recently, and some people would say, oh yeah, we don't care because, he's too controversial. He talks too much or whatever. But the truth is he is speaking, right? I don't think we have many people on that level as bold as Very Dark Man has been. So he may not always get it right, but at least he speaks. And if we had more Very Dark Men, Nigeria the whole continent would have gone farther. But yeah, so these girls were being trafficked to Cote d'Ivoire, and people were not aware of it. So what they would tell their families would be, oh, there's a business deal. It could even be somebody they know, like a family friend. Oh, there's a business deal. We're going to take you abroad. And some people who are impoverished and desperate, they fall for this, and they don't know that their children are in Cote d'Ivoire and actually other parts of, especially West Africa and other parts of Africa, being trafficked, even outside of the continent. So to be able to expose this was, because a lot of us didn't know. And again, to your point about that didn't say much story, there was hardly any story on this. The Western media is like, where are you guys? This is huge. So I'm glad, and this is why Authentic African is such a go-to, because how would we have known, right? How would people have known if they hadn't heard it from this platform?
Right. And I appreciate you bringing the story to my attention, because of course I would not have known, because, you're doing the work. So, Gloria obviously deserves credit for many of these stories, because she's the one who brings them to us. And that's the reason why we're even reporting on these. So I just want to make sure you guys know that. And you brought my attention to Very Dark Man. Now, living on the continent, I will say I have seen a lot. And this is something I haven't talked much about on this channel. But when I lived in Ghana, there are certain areas of town where you drive around and you see this. And it looks a lot like Hunts Point in the 1980s, Times Square in the 1980s, where you have these young ladies walking, trying to make a living, right? And you never really know how anyone gets there. I think many people probably presume that those women chose that career path. And I think what you're seeing with this video is that many of people can be tricked into that particular career path. And then once you're there, you have a debt to pay to someone. I was actually planning to do a story on this at one point in time, but just never got around to it when I was living in Ghana. But, this is something that is very prevalent around West Africa, and it's not talked about enough. You hear these people telling you can get these jobs in Dubai, you can get these jobs in these other countries. They're not verified sources. They promise you to change your life and to be able to make a salary to take care of your family. And so people kind of follow these things blindly, looking for a better way. And what ends up happening is what you see here. And luckily, attention was brought to it, and these women were able to be repatriated back to the society back in Nigeria. Let's hope that they're accepted back into society and are able to live long, productive lives. Because I also know that there's a stigma associated with this, especially those who ended up having children based on this, right? Because, there's a constant reminder of this situation that happened. And so, I do hope that they have systems in place to ensure that these women are able to repatriate and assimilate back into society, back home, without a stigma associated with what they just went through, right? So yeah, those are my thoughts here. Any final thoughts on this particular story?
Yeah, so, and I'm glad you talked about seeing these people, and it looks like, oh, you're just choosing to be a prostitute. Many of them are forced into brothels. They're made to work under coercive conditions. They're threatened with violence. Sometimes they're drugged. They take away their documents. So that, of course, they become isolated because of that. And they're told that their families back home will be harmed if they attempt to escape. So it's not so easy to just escape. So like you said, the debt, they have to pay the debt because they say you owe for your transport and you must work it off. They're not, the people behind this are not random criminals. These are well-organized networks that operate across countries, often with the help, or maybe the silence, of corrupt immigration officials, with the help of local authorities, even some business owners. So some of these routes have been active for years and are well known to intelligence and border control agencies, but they go unchecked. So when girls don't see a future and families can't feed their children, traffickers become believable, and Nigeria's economic struggles have made it worse. So as long as there are no viable options at home, like somebody wrote, this will continue. Many girls are rescued and then they get returned. They come back to the exact conditions that got them trafficked in the first place. I will say that Nigeria's anti-trafficking agency does good work, but it is underfunded and it's more reactive than anything. We need more intelligence sharing across borders. There should also be more public awareness campaigns so people, children can be aware, parents can be aware. And you talked about stigma. This is very important. And I was concerned about their faces being displayed, but I get it. I guess that was just the situation, but they come back stigmatized, they come back blamed. So they must be protected, because imagine going through all that and then being re-victimized. They also need justice. Prosecutions for trafficking are very few. These traffickers need to be punished no matter their status.
Well put. And I think all that context was needed and helpful. So with that, I mean, we are way over time. I would love to have gone through stories from around the continent, and maybe we should do quick rapid fire headlines if we can. So I do want to run through a couple of quick stories just to make sure that we cover them, because we meant to before. So there was a question last week about what's happening between Sierra Leone and Guinea and the Yenga dispute. Now, Sierra Leone is covered on, like, 3/4 of Sierra Leone is surrounded by Guinea, and then another portion of our border is next to Liberia. And there has been a dispute on a border town. And so do you want to give that story really quickly, and then maybe I can show you guys the town where this is happening on screen?
Sure. So Sierra Leone and Guinea, as you mentioned, share borders, and there's a dispute over the town of Yenga. It's a tiny town, but it's a symbolically loaded settlement located along that shared border. So Guinean troops have been in Yenga for over 2 decades. In the late 1990s, during Sierra Leone's brutal civil war, they entered Yenga pretending, or under the pretext of helping Sierra Leone repel rebels from Sierra Leone. But even after that war ended in 2002, they refused to fully pull out. They've had bilateral agreements, including one that was signed in 2012, which acknowledged that Yenga was Sierra Leonean territory, yet the Guinean military's continued presence and their unilateral actions keep undermining these commitments. Historically, and I'm going to analyze in just a bit, but I just want to say historically, the region, that area was drawn, as you know, but the colonialists who came to Africa drew borders everywhere and caused a lot of issues. We talked about that earlier when we're talking about Carole Malone's comment. But they came and divided the people and all that. And now Yenga is caught in the crossfire. So Yenga is just one of the stories, one of the many stories throughout the continent that's having these issues because of these borders that were drawn back in the day. Did we talk about that during the Carole Malone story? Can't remember.
We didn't. No, we're not much.
Maybe I thought it.
So and it's a constant conversation happening here. Not too many people are reporting on it. I mean, there are definitely blogs talking about it, people locally in country talking about it, but there aren't many international news outlets talking about it. There is some concern here in country. I think people who are coming to visit keep hearing about it and are worried about it. As of right now, what we understand is that the Sierra Leone military has always said they're not going to operate there. And the agreement with the people of Yenga was that no military would be occupying that space. Unfortunately, Guinea has not followed through with that part of the agreement, right? And so apparently they do have military there. And the people don't want them there, but the Sierra Leone military has chosen not to be there, even though, as you mentioned, it is contested land, and not only is it contested, but it has been recognized as Sierra Leonean territory. So we'll continue to follow the story as much as we can and share it out, share it to you guys. Panda Genius on YouTube discussed this topic apparently, and so we'll come back to you with more on this in the coming weeks. Next was U.S. cutting aid to Zambia due to medicine theft. Do we want to talk about that really quickly?
Yeah, very quickly. So the U.S. is cutting $50 million in annual health aid to Zambia due to widespread theft of U.S. donated medical supplies, including antiretrovirals that are used to treat HIV. Now, they're saying half of pharmacies surveyed in Zambia were selling medications that were supposed to be distributed free of charge. So the U.S. Embassy described this as a systemic issue that's been ongoing, and it expressed its disappointment with the Zambian government. I'm sorry, I'm laughing because this isn't the first time Zambia has been accused of corruption in the health sector. In 2009, the Netherlands and Sweden suspended aid because of embezzlement of health funds, including those that were earmarked for ARVs. What is going on in Zambia? What is up with you people? Why are we doing this? I don't get it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll just add to that. You know, look, you don't want to give people who are bad actors a reason to continue to be bad actors, right? The U.S. was looking for a reason to cut aid, and you gave them one, right? Zambia gave them a reason to cut aid. You know, these are supposed to be medications given away free of charge, and yet all of these pharmacies are selling it to the people, right? It was meant to be given so that people can actually treat lifelong illnesses, right? And so, you know, that's a problem. And so, you know, it's understandable, you know, whoever is the president of the United States, if they decided to make changes, I don't know about cutting aid completely, but making changes and putting things in place to ensure that it's being distributed properly, I think that's the way to do it. But nonetheless, I mean, the fact that that has happened is Zambia's fault, not anyone else's. All right, on to the next story. Next and final story. The Ivory Coast opposition leader has stepped down. Do you want to talk about this a bit? And this will be the last and final story.
Sure. Tidjane Thiam, a former CEO of Credit Suisse and a widely respected technocrat with both Ivorian and global credentials, had only recently returned to Cote d'Ivoire with ambitions to challenge President Ouattara's hold on power. We talked about last week how they removed him from the presidential poll. He cannot vote. He cannot run for presidency. And then, a recent court ruling struck him off the electoral roll, declaring that he lost his Ivorian citizenship in 1987 when he acquired French nationality. Now he has formally renounced his French citizenship to comply, or he did that earlier this year to comply with eligibility rules, but the court has ruled that this didn't automatically restore his Ivorian citizenship. So this is, a lot of people have criticized this and saying that it's all politically motivated. But you had some interesting thoughts on this, Joe. I'd love to hear it again.
Yeah. So, so just to be clear, right? So in Ivory Coast, if you want to run for president, you cannot be a dual national with anywhere else, right? So that's number one. So this gentleman ran for the party nomination of his political party while he still had French citizenship. He then renounced his French citizenship, but that was too late. And that's part of the argument. Now, his argument was that this hasn't happened before, but it has happened recently. And he knows better because he's been in politics since the 90s. Now, he's been in and out of public and private life. He's been part of politics in the 90s. He also, as you mentioned, worked at Credit Suisse and all these other places. He's actually a very well-respected individual. But again, you cannot give bad actors a reason to stop you from doing what you're trying. If you're trying to make your country better, you cannot give bad actors a reason to do so.
Yes.
I think he didn't want to renounce his French citizenship because it wasn't easy to get. And until he knew he got his party's nomination, he didn't want to give it up. That's my own personal belief system. And honestly, it makes sense. I get it. But unfortunately, by doing it when he did it, he not only no longer has his French citizenship, but he also cannot be president of Ivory Coast. And so he basically failed on both fronts by not following the process before he got nominated by his party. And by the way, there's some inner party politics. There are also people in his party that didn't want him to be the nominee. So they also fought against it and basically helped to ensure that he no longer is the party's nominee. But, you know, to be honest with you, had he done the right thing, you know, he wouldn't be in this position in the first place. So you don't want to give people a reason to stop you from making your country better. So if that's his real goal, then, you know, obviously he can run again, maybe in the next election cycle. But unfortunately, he forfeited that by not giving up his French citizenship long before he ran for his party's nomination. All right. So that is the last story of today. We went an hour and 40 plus minutes. Hopefully you guys found this useful, engaging, and helpful. We saw a lot of great comments in the comment section, so we appreciate you guys joining in the discussion. Any final words, Gloria, before we go?
Oh, just thank you all for joining us. We really, really appreciate you. Spread the word. Let them know at Authentic on the African, at the Gloria Ayo. Of course, the more you interact with us, the more encouraged we get to keep doing what we're doing. So thank you all so much.
Absolutely. And I'll say I apologize for the technical difficulties.
It wasn't
no
bad.
idea. No idea.
It wasn't that bad.
You know, but yeah, so, but you know, I appreciate you guys being patient with the process, and thank you, Gloria, for holding it down every time I got cut out. And all of you who are watching, if you know anybody who's interested at all in what's happening in Africa, every Thursday we will be live going over the news of the day on the continent. All the stories that you're not going to hear on mainstream news, that is the purpose of this platform, is to tell you what you need to know as you are thinking about moving, investing, visiting, or even just care about the Pan-African struggle. So we'll be doing this every week on Thursdays at 9 p.m. GMT, which may change times EST, but as of right now, it's 5 p.m. EST. So make sure you like, if you're watching this on a replay, comment, make sure you subscribe to both platforms, at the Gloria Ayo on YouTube, Authentic African on YouTube, and then of course those same platforms across all social media. And so with that, guys, thanks for watching. We will see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye, guys.